Welcome in, everybody. I'm so happy today to be able to talk about automations and kind of what's out there in the field today. So I'll go ahead and give you a moment to introduce yourself, and then we'll go from there.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me today, Nora. Really excited to be here as well, too. Hopefully everyone's staying nice and cool and dry. I know it's been rainy across the country, at least here on the East Coast it has been. My name is
Yeah.
Daleele Alison. I am the CEO of RooksDM. We specialize in working with financial advisory firms and RIAs all around creating an operational system that allows them to run as efficiently as possible. Where we're spending most of our time today is talking a lot about AI and how AI fits into helping team members operate more efficiently. And certainly, we've done a ton with automations and integrations as well, which I'll share a little bit of examples about. My background has been in the technology space for well over a decade, typically always looking at how do you use tech to just operate more efficiently and solve real business problems. And that's what we do today with RA firms. So, really excited to
I
be here.
love that. Yeah, it's probably such a big transformation you see when somebody is looking for that initial help to at the very end of it. And I don't know why I get so excited when I see technology working the way it should and working together.
It's always great, especially when,
Yeah.
like you said, when they come together, it makes it very meaningful, which is really good.
Yeah, definitely. So do you want to share your screen and we'll kind of go through the presentation and what you've kind of seen out there in the field lately? And I know that AI is just such a big buzzword in the industry that
Yeah.
it's so nice to kind of build in some continued education here throughout the summer to make sure you're not falling behind, just because the more you postpone it, it's like that starting line just gets further and further. So,
Yeah, and it's changing so rapidly as well too. So
yeah,
that even is another challenge. But yeah, I agree. And it's one of those things where how do you adopt it sooner so you can start reaping some of the benefits, but also taking things into consideration to not, a lot of people are fatigued with AI and technology
right.
as
That's
well
true.
too. So it's kind of balancing the two, is what firms are wrestling with today.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Yeah, I can run through my slides that I have. Would love to make this interactive as well too. So if people do have questions, I have the chat open. So feel free to drop any questions you may have in the chat and I can be monitoring those along the way. And then Nora, feel free to stop me if I'm talking too much and we want to pause for questions, which is always good. But I do have some transition slides as well too, which I'll talk about. We already covered who I am, what I do. If you want to drop in the chat, are you guys currently documenting? Do you have all of your document processes documented? And do you feel like they're consistently followed? And Nora, I'm sure you might have some insight as well too in terms of like some of what you're seeing from the work that you guys are doing.
Yep. Yeah, it's definitely a struggle, especially creating that buy-in from everybody, making sure that, even if you have everything documented and perfect, is everyone using it is the next question, which is very tough as well.
That makes sense. Yeah. And I always like to start with this because I know we're talking about creating efficiency, but obviously our lens is very much process first, technology second. So I
Yeah.
typically start with this slide because it helps frame the mindset of identifying ways and areas you can actually leverage technology. And so, like, these are the core focus, these are the core processes that we see across advisory firms today. Um, New client reaches out, they're interested in learning more about your firm and possibly hiring you to help them manage their money, create a financial plan, things of that nature. That's the intake process. That's a critical point as well, too. And when we talk about like precise FP and forms and being able to capture data, that's a really good mechanism to start using those types of tools to not only capture basic information, but it leads into the client onboarding as well to beneficiary information, documents, things of that nature are really good ways to think about, hey, where can we actually collect data in a more structured and streamlined manner, which I'll talk a little bit later about. Onboarding is certainly a big one. So, hey, they sign up with your firm, and now you need to collect all of those additional pieces of information. Client services as well, too. So, most of the firms that we work with obviously meet with their clients on a certain cadence. Being able to automate that of, hey, we know we're meeting with this group of clients on a quarterly basis. And so if you can have like a last meeting date set in your CRM, for example, you can run automations based off of that date that says, hey, Daleele's meeting is coming up for this quarter. We're 45 days away. At that period of time, we want to start initiating the meeting scheduling process, and triggering those types of automations can happen on the client services, and that's where a lot of the back and forth happens. And then the last one certainly is offboarding. So we call this putting a bow on a file. So if a client's transitioning, if there's a major life event, or if something happens to where you need to put a bow on the file, offboarding is certainly a key process to take into consideration and think about, hey, if we do mark this as closed, what downstream effects actually need to happen post that decision point.
Yeah, and what kind of informed business decisions can you see be made from these? Like if something's taking too long, or if there's a hang up internally or on the client side, is there a way to address that?
Yeah, that's a great question. It usually yields conversation, and conversation usually surfaces either pain points, challenges, or considerations of changes that they may want to make. Sometimes it becomes, hey, we're collecting this information not early enough. So then by the time they reach onboarding, there's some basic information that they should have captured in intake that wasn't. So it surfaces that of, oh, in the intake process, we should have specific key pieces of information captured because we know it's going to impact onboarding and not let us move forward. The bigger item as well, too, just big picture, is asking the question of, does technology actually help me solve this problem? So if I have a process and I realize, hey, this process is really inefficient or is taking too long, is it too cumbersome in terms of the numbers of steps you have for the process? I talk about it as well too in some of the data guidelines of not catering to the minority. Sometimes what we see as well too is you have 15 different ways in terms of how you onboard a client, and that makes it very cumbersome. So the question becomes, hey, can we narrow that down and have three core processes related to onboarding, two core processes related to intake? And if it falls outside of one of those, maybe it's the exception that we just handle, and maybe it is a little bit more manual and not fully automate it, but it happens so rare or not enough volume to justify thinking through how do you really automate it. So that's usually are the conversations or kind of decision points that come out of this slide and kind of having those conversations.
Really nice. Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. So I'll go one of the ways when we're talking about AI. So this is a really good simple use case of being able to leverage AI. If you're not already doing it today, leveraging AI to create or document your processes. Here's just a simple screenshot of Microsoft Copilot. I went into Word and I said, hey, I'm a 10-person RA firm that is looking to create a streamlined process for my firm, create a version based off that. So you could see it builds you out an actual SOP document associated with an operating playbook. Very useful way of leveraging AI. It also documents the process in a format that people could read or either use AI to ask a question against of, hey, what is our actual process for onboarding, for intake, for things of that nature. So if you're not doing that today, if you don't have your processes documented today, here's a good way to get started on that. If you do have your processes documented today, you can even go into Word, open Copilot, ask it for suggestions based off of best practices, things you may have missed. It will give you that feedback. And then the other thing that we see as well too is a lot of processes live in people's heads. So one of the things that you can do as well too is just on the bottom right, you can see the little microphone there. If you just click on the microphone and say, hey, as part of our onboarding process, we're spending too much time doing A, B, and C, or hey, I noticed that in my onboarding process, this is a process I follow. Make sure it's in my standard operating procedures document, and it can take that and put it. It can remember that for future reference. So then when you start wrapping AI into all of this, you have the latest and greatest operating model, and everything is flushed out in terms of how you guys operate as a firm.
Okay, what are some of those bullet points that you wrote in your prompt?
These came out as a output. So the
Oh,
question that I
okay.
asked, yeah, so it just essentially said, hey, I created a streamline operating playbook, and it gave specifics on what best practices it included. So roadmap, it talked about a ready to implement checklist. The thing with AI as well too, this was a pretty basic prompt. If you could be more specific, it's better. So if you can tailor it to your firm, I mentioned here some specifics. 10-person firm probably operates a little bit differently than a 100 200 person firm versus a solo or a single person firm. So the more that you can be specific around the prompt that you give AI, the better it can tailor the content that it produces based off of that specificity.
And do you find it's helpful to even put names like Nora is the admin or whatever it may be?
You could. Yeah, you want to be with operating procedures. Obviously, you always want to be mindful of privacy. If you're leveraging Copilot, it's okay because it already has access to your data if you're on the enterprise version and it follows Microsoft security framework. But yeah, if you could be more specific, that would be helpful. And maybe not even names. Maybe you could just put like the different types of roles that are out there as well. And maybe you can specify, hey, our CSA or our senior financial advisor is really struggling. So focus on that area a little bit more than others, and give me some ideas in terms of how we can improve it.
Yeah. And for people that don't know about Copilot, can you talk about that just very briefly?
Yeah, talking a lot about Copilot. So Copilot is AI within the Microsoft ecosystem. So the really nice thing is if you have an enterprise license with Copilot, it gives you AI capabilities leveraging all of the Microsoft data. So Microsoft is a behemoth of data because if you think about it, if you're using Outlook, it has your email communication on there, which is a plethora of information. If you're storing your documents on SharePoint, it has access to that information. Obviously, the calendar events that happen, it can see, hey, I have this webinar that's scheduled for today. It has access to that information. Microsoft Teams, a lot of the firms that we work with as well too are leveraging Microsoft Teams for collaboration and communication. They have channels and things of that nature set up. So it has access to all of the Microsoft data across your specific ecosystem. So it's closed off to your house is what we call it. So your environment has all of this information. And so what Copilot can do is it can go across all of the data that it has access to and give you insight. Simple example may be, hey, I'm preparing for a meeting with Nora. Help me prepare based off previous communications that I've had. And like I said, it will go through all of those different data points, calendar events, emails, any documents I have stored, and create me a pre-meeting brief for my conversation with Nora based off of that. And that's all out of the box through Microsoft Copilot because the data lives in the ecosystem. It also has the capability, we're talking about like custom agents and things that you want to build you want to build a specific agent around a task. It could be, hey, build me an agent around that's a tax expert. Could be a good example of that. And so that agent is highly trained to be essentially like a CPA, right? They would know all the rules and regulations. It would stay up to date on any new changes that happen on the law side of things. And you could have it be very specific to that. That is Copilot Studio, which gives you the ability to create some of those custom agents. So that's like a level two versus what you get out of the box.
Interesting. Yeah. And that's why you would suggest using Copilot versus like a Claude or ChatGPT.
Exactly. Yeah. And Claude has released some items as well too that lets you plug into your Microsoft environment. So we're validating that, ensuring like security is a big concern. And
Mm.
with the Microsoft framework, since A, Microsoft already has access to your data, B, Microsoft has been around for decades, so we don't think they're going anywhere. And then C, it follows the right permissions and controls as you set on the back end, which makes it advantageous to leverage. And it's one less platform you have to worry about setting up a user, paying for a subscription, monitoring access, and things of that nature. It's one less thing to have to worry about.
Yeah, so it's complementary with your subscription. Most of the time, you don't have to add tokens and things like that, like some of the other AI agents or AI competitors.
Yeah, depending on what you're doing. So definitely, if you're using Copilot Studio to build custom agents, that has a separate pricing model and it does
Oh,
have
okay.
like a usage. The Copilot Enterprise, which is with the business license that it doesn't come with your license, so it's a separate license that you have to pay for. I believe, don't quote me on this, $18 per user per month. I can send you a link to the pricing table afterwards. That includes the capability out of the box, is what we call it. So you just pay the $18 per user per month, and now they have access to Copilot and they can leverage it to get those types of insights right away. One of the things you
Yeah.
want, One of the things you want to make sure though is prior to rolling out Copilot firm wide is that you just have all of your permissions and controls set up on the back end. So then that way, if someone, let's say the example I always use, you have access to the HR folder that has all payroll, salaries, all of that
Mm.
information, and you shouldn't have access to it. Um, Copilot wouldn't know that. You have to set that up on the permissions level. So you always want to make sure that your permissions based off roles and users are set up appropriately. Because if a user, in this case, you ask, hey, Copilot, what's the little salary? And you happen to have access to that data source, it will give you that response. So we always promote or suggest that you work with your IT provider. We provide an audit as well too. If you want to reach out to me, I can help provide more information on that. But you make sure that everything is set up appropriately ahead of rolling it out firm wide.
Yeah, wow, that's such good information. And how has the workflow changed now since you've been introducing and suggesting Microsoft Copilot when you want to do a document or you want to start a process? Are you always opening up Copilot as the first thing?
Yeah, so it's definitely one way to go. So you don't have to start with a blank slate. So
Yeah.
it's a great mechanism, it's a great thought partner, if you will. So if you're creating like an the SOP one is pretty simple, which is why I showcase it here. But yeah, it's a great starting point to not have to start from a blank canvas. And you can just start with Copilot and say, hey, create me a document for this. It can help you with email replies. It can help you with marketing content. It can help you with the meeting preps that I mentioned. So it can do so much just out of the box with that subscription that you're paying for, which is why we highly recommend it. And we are seeing a lot of firms adopt it for the compliance reason is a big component of, hey, we're already living in Microsoft. It
Hmm.
makes sense. It bolts into our day to day. We know we've been using it for decades, it's not going away. So that's why we've been leaning a little bit more heavily in the Microsoft world.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Awesome. I'll stop to see. I don't know. Let me pull up the chat to make sure I didn't miss any questions. I don't know if I can actually see. Okay, yes, here we go. Yeah, and feel free if anyone has any questions, you can drop them in the chat. I now officially have the chat open. I'll open up the Q&A as well too. Awesome. I'll keep going though.
Hmm.
And I wanted to start here because it's obviously important to have your processes documented. And then, like we talked about already, like how do you spot inefficiencies? Going through that exercise, you'll be able to determine, hey, people entering data more than once. Is there a bottleneck based off one person? Is there too many workflow variations? So these were some of the things that we talked about in terms of being able to spot those inefficiencies and then figuring out where technology, whether it's AI, automation, or integration, actually fits into everything. I'll talk about data standards. So that's a key component as well too, because now what we're seeing in the space is obviously AI is very powerful. It can do a lot. It can take a lot of unstructured data and give you insights based off of it. But data standards are becoming even more important because, as I mentioned in the example with the CPA agent, the more specific you can be on what that agent is doing, the better outputs you can receive. The example that we always use is imagine you hire an intern and you tell the intern to create you a report and you say, hey, create me a report. All of the documents that you need live across all of these different shelves. And so now the intern has to go take out the binder or the book, read through it, see if there's related information based off the report that you're looking to generate, put that back and go through that whole process over and over again. Versus if you said, hey, build me a report, all of the data that you need associated with the report is located on this one shelf. So go to the middle shelf in this row and capture those documents, and it has all the information you need to generate the report. Now it can be much more efficient. It doesn't have to synthesize or go through a whole bunch of information. It's much more targeted in terms of what it's looking at. And so it just gives you better output. And so that's some of the way to think about data standards as well too is, hey, what's the defined rule in terms of how you collect, process, store, and manage your data across the firm? Because ultimately what that will do is allow you to really utilize and leverage not only AI but automations as well too, because it says, hey, we know our last meeting date is always captured in the CRM. So anytime we need to update that field, we'll update it in the CRM. And if there's other locations that we need to manage that data, we can set up an automation that would automatically take it from the CRM into a different location. Maybe it's creating a document, maybe it's in your planning software, whatever it may be, just go into the CRM, update that field, and then the rest will be updated automatically through automations. But without the data standards, you wouldn't know that. So that's why we always start with, hey, what are your data standards? Do you have a process around it? What does it look like across your firm today? And then identify, hey, how can we simplify the movement of data between systems and make it much easier for you guys to actually collect, process, and store it across the firm?
Yeah, I could see too, a strategic decision would be cutting out where so much data is too, because it's living in so many places now that it's getting overwhelming.
Correct. Yeah. You guys do a lot. You probably see this as well too, having a source of truth for certain data points and having like that mapped out across your firm.
Yes, yeah, I feel like that's the most essential thing to do to have any sanity is just at least declare internally there is one source of truth and then we go from there.
Yep. Yeah, and that a lot of firms struggle with that, and then understanding we call it like the data architecture of how all of the data is connected across the firm and across the systems is the big thing.
Yes. And Meredith has a question. Do you help firms create data standards or is that up to each firm to figure out? One of our biggest bottlenecks is data collection, and I'd love to hear any insights about how to make that more efficient.
Yeah, so we guide firms in being able to set up those data standards. So we do a lot of discovery and consultative work in terms of how are you collecting it, how are you processing it, what are the key points for your firm, what needs to be updated when. Obviously, the firm owns the data standards, but we can provide best practices, things that we've seen, maybe considerations or things that you would want to ask. So we can certainly help you guys be able to determine those data standards. Around data collection, I have a few other slides around data collection that we'll talk about, which forms are a huge piece of that, and why they're important. All starts with what information are you collecting and how to go about structuring it in a way that makes it easier for you to collect. But that all starts with the data standards that you have set up. Why are we collecting this information? What needs to be collected? Where do we need it to live? Is this actually critical for us to collect? Or are we just collecting it just to have it on file? So going through that whole process and answering those questions are the prerequisite ahead of building out these forms, because once you have all that identified, the forms make it significantly easier to collect it and process it at the end of the day. Hopefully that answers your question, Meredith. And Nora, I don't know if you have anything to chime in because obviously you're a data collection expert too.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say, of course, with data collection, something like Precise FP is very helpful for gathering that data. A lot of the offices will start in the form library because a lot of those forms are pre-built. But what I'm thinking with how you're mentioning is, if you have a whiteboard and you literally hash out internally what are the data points that we need? Why do we need it? Where does it need to go? When, at what point do we need to collect it? If you could mind map that out, there is an AI feature in Precise P where you could literally copy and paste that exact order and those exact fields that you need into the software and it will create that form for you. And I could see that being a much more strategic direction, being future forward instead of just grabbing a template where you're being very specific. Like, I do not need to know somebody's maiden name. We're not going to collect that at all ever, kind of
Yep,
thing. And just get that off of your plate altogether.
that makes sense. And you said that's built in within the Precise FP, so you can just dump all that there and then it will build out the mind map of the data.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if
Nice.
you're doing it on a whiteboard, you could take a picture of that and then copy the text, ask Copilot or Chat or Claude to make a prompt saying, create me a form with these fields in this order and, and with these drop downs or make it required and then stick that into Precise P and it will create that form for you.
That's really helpful. Yeah. And I'm sure it probably provides some suggestions as well too on things that you may want to include in the form based off what you provided.
Yep.
Nice. Yeah, that's definitely a helpful one. And sometimes I also feel like too, even using a tool like that is helpful because then it will start to spark ideas for the people that are using it. Like, oh, I didn't think about that. Or maybe I want to include this on the form. Or like you said, like the conditional logic or the drop down fields, they may start to see it come to life and start to add things or think about things to remove. So that's a good point.
Yeah. And I see a lot of now not so much of the DNA type of information being collected, but more open-ended questions. So, trying to figure out what kind of open-ended questions you want to know and how to spark different responses that will be more in depth. And then you can, see the different responses over time is really helpful as well.
That makes sense. Do you guys typically lean like more drop-down lists, radio buttons, things of that nature for data collection?
Yes, yeah. Historically, it's definitely been more of that, enter in your social, put in your driver's license number, those kind of hard fields. But I really see a lot of offices going more into like, tell me what your future looks like in a perfect world and let the client write it out. And they find that to be very helpful.
That makes sense. Yeah. And not to get ahead, I know we're kind of having, but this is exactly what you're talking about with the forms as well, too. Um, and having those drop down lists or radio buttons make it more consistent in terms of the data that you're capturing. The other one I was looking at, I have a demo that I walk through as well too of like as simple as what is your preferred method of communication. And I have like email, phone, text message. Someone could type text if it was a free field option like you were saying, and they could just type it in. Someone may type text, the other may type text message, the other one might type TXT, and so that makes it harder to have consistency across your data, which I agree with. But yeah, this was one to your point in terms of leveraging forms. So like you're saying with online with Precise FP, being able to capture better data from the start makes it not only standardization but creating the consistency across your data. It also makes it better, like we're talking about, figuring out what you need to collect up front to reduce the back and forth. So you're not saying, "Oh, I didn't capture this key piece of information. I need to go back and get it." And ultimately, what it allows you to do by leveraging online forms is to make the handoffs much quicker. So once it gets to Nora's inbox, for example, she has everything she needs to get it to the next milestone versus having to go back a step to be able to go forward, is what we always say. And that's the power of online forms. And then in addition to that, you can leverage it post the submission of the form and do a lot of automation post submission, like moving the data across different systems, creating folders, sending out notifications, sending out emails. You can do all of that with the help of an online form because you have key information there. This was one that you mentioned some of these items as well too. So like the validate up front. So data collection guidelines, obviously be intentional. Take the time to really think about what data you actually need to collect. You mentioned maiden name, for example. If it's not necessary, don't collect it, is what we say. Also the validation up front with tools, like Precise FP, you're able to like validate, hey, this is actual email address. Hey, it's a phone number. Hey, with the drop down field, we know we're capturing consistent information. And then we talked about like the integrate and automate, so being able to connect the systems together. And then this is the point I want to reiterate as well as like the majority rules. So always lead with a majority first mindset. A lot of times what we see is firms will say, hey, like, okay, we can go from 15 ways to do it down to three, but even within the three, they may have a lot of exceptions. So we really try to, I don't want to say challenge that, but have them think about, hey, do you really need to automate this, or is this something that happens so infrequently that someone can just have a manual process for, or a process that isn't as laborious as you think it may be by making it overcomplicated? Awesome. Anything to add there, Nora?
I know Jillian wants to know, is there things that will be shown with Hubly? And I'll jump in at the end and try to show some of the automation tips with Hubly as well.
Awesome. Do you want me to keep going and then you'll swap in?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. I'll share some examples. I'll give you some time as well too to run through that. So I'll go through some examples maybe and skip over some of these slides. I definitely wanted to chat about integrations. Obviously, you guys have a lot of integrations as well too, but really thinking about integrating your systems together. So if you're not already doing that, certainly revisiting that at its core because that saves a lot of time. So now that you understand your processes, you have the data standards in place, understanding how you're data is moving from one system to another. Native out-of-the-box integrations is what we call them, are very powerful. So always look to see if tools that you're using have out-of-the-box integrations that will move data from one location to another. Simple one, obviously, is calendar scheduling is the first thing that happens up front. So if you have Calendly, G reminders, whatever it may be, having whenever someone books a time using a scheduling automation tool, ensuring that it's synced to your CRM. Same thing with Precise FP. If you have people fill out the forms, ensuring that that data goes into the other locations. And I know Precise FP has a lot of out of the box or native integrations. Those are low-hanging fruits that you can get set up. Sometimes we see people don't have them set up, and it's just a matter of getting those set up so you don't have to move the data across different locations. The nice thing about the native ones as well, too, little to no maintenance, so you don't have to worry about maintaining it. The providers usually do that. The only maybe contour or drawback is you can't fully customize it, so it's based off of what's out of the box that's available, but usually they take the end user into mind when they're building these things. So you're more than likely will get what you need out of the native integration. And if that certainly doesn't work, you can do custom integration. So a lot of the work that we do is in Microsoft's Power Automate, but that gives you the ability to say, hey, there's no native way to be able to do this out of the box. We want the data to go from system A to system B, leveraging tools like Power Automate, Zapier, N8N, or going fully custom and leveraging the APIs gives you the ability to move those data points from one location to another. It is more flexible. It's fully customizable, obviously, if you have the control of leveraging the APIs. It is dependent on what data points are available, and it does require some upfront setup and ongoing maintenance. But if it's, hey, we're doing this 15 times a day and it's a manual process, that may warrant the need to set up some of these automations that are custom that would help make those processes more streamlined. Here's some simple ones of like how to think about how data moves. So scheduling automation CRM, online forms to CRM, online forms to document management, e-signature to document management is a big one. So if you receive a new services agreement, being able to get that into a folder for that new client that's onboarding automatically. A lot of custom workflows as well too related to notifications, or if you're looking to grab data across multiple different systems, that's where the custom agents kick in. So if you want it to say, hey, I want to look at data in my 365 environment as well as maybe Precise FP or maybe one of your meeting note takers, you can create a custom agent and be able to ask your agent, hey, help me prep for this meeting, help me see where I need to capture more information for client A, B, and C. So you can build those things using custom agents as well. And then last but not least, I'll kind of anything to add there, Nora?
No, not right now.
Okay. The last thing I'll go through is just a few examples, and then I'll transition it back to you. So here's a good example of manual versus automated. So if we think about Chris, he's a staff member. There's an inquiry form that's been submitted. The staff has to manually add the prospect into the CRM. They have to send the email to set up a meeting time. They have to go through, confirm a time, send an invite, and then they have to go into the CRM and kick off the prospect workflows. And so when you think about workflow automations and big picture wise, these are how some of the pieces fit together in this instance, is you can leverage automation to say, hey, once the form is submitted, add that prospect directly into the CRM. And then now that we know who submitted the form, we can send a customized email to that person saying, hi, Daleele, thank you for filling out the form. The next step in our process is to meet with one of our amazing advisors. Here's the link to our calendar to book a time that's most convenient to you. So that becomes fully automated, and it's customized to the person that actually fills out the form. And then from there, you're empowering the prospect. They have the ability to say, oh, let me figure out what time works best for me. The prospect's able to fill out the time, and you don't have to have a staff member going back and forth via email to get that scheduled. And then last but not least, what you can also do in this example is the automation will be able to kick off the prospect workflows in your CRM systematically. So it knows form's been submitted, meeting's been scheduled. Now let's kick off the remaining prospect workflows in the CRM. This is just one example of automations. It's also one example of the power of online forms of with the click of that submit button, what happens afterwards is very powerful to be able to free up a lot of people's time, create a better client experience, ensure things don't fall through the cracks. through those online form tools. And then this is just the quantity, or like being able to showcase how much time is being saved. So if we say, hey, has to process 5 prospects a week, maybe low, especially if you're in high growth mode, but even still, he's saving 65 hours per year just through that automated process. And you can also see here we go from 20 manual steps in terms of having to go through the process down to 0. So now the automations are able to take on that effort as it relates to getting these prospect meetings scheduled. And that's just one click. Like I said, there's endless possibilities. We talked about the new prospects form being submitted, but there's so many other things that you can do with online forms that get submitted. You can store the data in the CRM, rename attachments, create folders. You can send out notifications. You can create tasks. You can kick off workflows in the CRM or other systems. You can update data. There's a lot that you can do once you receive information from an online form. And then I'll go through one more example, and then I'll transition it back to you, Nora. But this is a really good example, and this is an actual use case of some of the work that we did for a client. So this puts together the whole picture. You can see here they were spending a lot of time going from inquiry to meeting in minutes, and so this was a combination of AI and automation. So the prospect filled out the form. It was sent, so we're able to get those submissions. So if you think of like NAPFA, FPA, those are online forms that people are filling out to request to meet with an advisor. We had set up a shared mailbox, and what that was able to do is capture all of those inquiries that were coming in. And then from there, what we were able to do is use AI to be able to identify, hey, this is an inquiry for a new client coming from this lead source. Let's get that information out. Let's review it and let's assign it to the appropriate team member based off of some of the data that came in from the form. And then from there, what we're able to do, as I mentioned, is automatically send out an email to that person that submitted that form that says, hey, thanks for filling out the form. Here's the link to our calendar. Update the CRM, kick off the workflows, and then we automatically sent out a Microsoft Teams message in the prospect channel saying, hey, Daleele just filled out the form. Here's the submission link. And that way, anyone on the sales side of the house would be able to get notified that this form had come through. And if they wanted to escalate or if they saw something that was that would want them to take action, they certainly could, and they would get it in real time to get notified that they received that specific information. Hopefully that's helpful. And I will transition it back to you, Nora.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, thank you so much. And we'll jump right into Hubly to talk more about automation and data. I feel like when we're talking about how important it is to have a streamlined process, half of the battle is that data and making sure you have the right data, it's easy to find, and it's documented somewhere nicely. So, something that we can put together for Hubly would be like for if you're doing RMDs, you might want to know additional information than what just the initial template is providing. So the templates that come with Hubly, there's more than 100 of them, and they're really great as a starting point, but you definitely want to inject your own secret sauce into it and make sure that it is applying to your firm, your office, your team. And one of the easy ways to do that I like to talk about is through forms. And I know we're talking about forms so much today. But something like this RMD workflow, if I want to edit this, there are these buttons here on each task, and that says form. So let's just say we kind of want to reassess this whole entire workflow, and initially we want a form to ask some questions so that way our team has the information they need to move forward with these other items. So we can go ahead and name this. I'll just name this important RMD information. And then we want to go ahead and select what kind of field we want to choose. And in this case, the first question I want to be asked is how should RMD distributions be processed? Are they automatic or are they manual? So we can go ahead and make it a single select drop down because there's only going to be one response that is selected. So I'll put how should RMD distributions be processed? And then as an option, we'll put automatic. And as another option, we'll put manual. And that could be a nice, intro question for your team, because if you think about it, that would be a phone call or a Slack that could be cut out because you were able to ask that now. And then another one that I think would be helpful is what distribution frequency does the client prefer? So maybe they want an annual distribution, maybe they want it to be quarterly, maybe they want it to be monthly. You could put those as additional options. So we'll do annual, monthly, quarterly, and maybe you even want to add biannually, whatever you see done most frequently. And then we could save that. And you could leave it as this, or you can keep going. Maybe we also want our team to know where it should be sent. So if it needs to be sent to a bank account, check by mail, things like that, we can add those as options. And maybe even you want to add in an option that says maybe it's a qualified charitable distribution to the charity, and the team will then need to check which charity this family prefers. And then we can add in an additional one. Let's just name this as paragraph because it would be more of a free form text field of any additional notes or client preferences. So what I just did is created a form within an RMD workflow that, if an advisor is having a meeting with their client and or a prospect turning into a client and RMDs is one of the things that is being handled, then they would go ahead and attach this RMD workflow to that new client. And before this advisor sends the rest of the tasks to the team, they would answer these questions. So that way your team is better prepared to complete the process rather than kind of being halted at these different points in the process of, do we actually have this information? Do I need to call somebody to ask about it? So that's something that you can think about implementing in regards to data and automation is adding in a form like that. So if we check off that box, someone on the team will be responsible for answering these questions in order for the rest of the team to move forward.
Does this integrate? I saw you had the red tail on the right as well too. So that will then launch red tails from this screen, correct?
Yeah, it does integrate with Redtail, so client data from Redtail is able to come in and go back, whether that's, birthday data, anniversary data, contact information. Once this workflow is done and completed, it'll get saved in Redtail as a note for history.
That's really nice.
So that's an option there that you can put into the workflow to add to that rich data collection and, maybe sitting down with the team and hashing out what the information you want to add into those forms is. And then, of course, you could adjust the rest of the workflow based on those responses or have different workflows based on the responses as well. But also within each workflow, there is a section here called automation rules that are built inherently into the platform. So you can make this a repeating rule. So repeating rule is very helpful If you want this to happen on a frequent basis, maybe you want this workflow to repeat annually, or the different parts throughout the year. So this is going to be one that is very helpful to kind of set it and forget it in regards to maybe just checking up on things for clients. So adding a rule for repeating is an option. There is also an important client date rule that you can configure. So if you want certain workflows to trigger off of an event, whether that's the last meeting date, ADV, anniversary, birthday, client anniversary, client since, fee, IPS, last estate review, or privacy, then that can be implemented as well. And there are different tags there that are coming in from your CRM. So this client date rule automation is available. So, as soon as that date passes, the workflow can automatically trigger, which I feel like automation is so helpful in that regards because in my opinion, the automation is kind of that static thing that's sitting on your desk that you need to get to. And the automation just does it for you based on that if then statement. Like if they have a birthday, then I want this to automatically go off. And kind of triggering from that, or a nice segue would be the age-based rules. These are very commonly used for many of those age-based milestones. So you want to think about some of the things that slip through the cracks that happen, especially if you find that a majority of the clients that you serve are in the same age group. A lot of these things can slip through the cracks because there's so many of them. But you can
Hmm.
do something, if somebody turns 50, if they turn 55, 59 and a half, 62 to 70, 72 and up. Um, and then you can ask specific questions or create a workflow to talk about Medicare or Social Security, or just talk about increasing distributions after a certain age. So that way you're making sure that none of those milestones slip through the cracks. So those are some automation rules that are available from within the platform. And we always offer consultations to kind of talk about your firm, your office, your clients, and your process so that we can really nail down how to add in these automations and add in these forms where they're going to be the most valuable. And then the last one here is add or remove stream and tag rule, which could be very helpful if you are using those tags correctly, then you're going to be able to implement some automations there as well. But those were kind of the two automation and data tips and tricks that I wanted to cover for Hubly. If you guys have any other suggestions on things that you're using, I would love to hear about them. And then if you have any other suggestions for Pilot, Microsoft Pilot, or how to use automations that you're seeing in the field, we can get to those as well.
I was going to ask in terms of the automations that I saw you had the drop downs. Do you guys send out emails as well too through automation in
Um,
Hubly?
it could be some settings that you set up that is
Yeah,
based on each individual. Because some advisors don't want notifications all the time, where some of the operations team might want notifications for every single thing. So you would want to adjust it for each person.
that makes sense. And then you mentioned some of the like the consultative work that you guys do, maybe similar to Meredith's question. Do you guys help with setting up the automations or helping firms think through which automations they should use within the Hubly platform? Or how does that whole process work with your team?
Yes, yeah, definitely. That would be a great use case of the consultation is, we've been using Hubly for this, this, and that, but I want to see how we can get more data here or how this step to this step can be more automated, and we can guide you along that process.
Makes sense. I was also going to ask too, AI, is that baked into the platform today? I know everyone's adding AI into their products as well. I don't know if you showcase that in a different demo or if that's something you can show here.
Yeah, that'll be definitely. I know Louis and the team are hard at work in building out some AI into the platform. And there are a few things available right now for beta
Hmm.
that you would want to sign up for and jump in. Like the work desk is available for beta right now, and they're loving getting feedback on it.
That's good to know. Yeah, so much is changing in the AI realm
I
that it's
know.
yeah.
I do have a question from Janelle.
Yeah.
Why does Hubbly always start with a filtering any user and every day I have to change it to current user to see my assignments? Great question. So the question is for the views, how come it always has to be reset? And I think that what Louis has in the works right now for the work desk is really going to address that. So if you haven't turned on the beta for work desk, definitely try that out and see if that helps. All right, perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I think it was so helpful to learn about Microsoft Pilot and how people are using that, as well as kind of just talk out how data and automation work together and which one comes first and what kind of bottlenecks can be created if you're not careful. So thank you so much for all of your coverage on that. Did you have a slide for additional contact information or how people can get more information if they're interested?
Yeah, I can share it. Or you want me to share my screen? Give me 1 second. I can put it on the screen here.
Okay.
So. Okay, let me see. Let me know when you can see my screen. Yeah, if you're interested as well too, here's a QR code. You could book a free efficiency audit, or you could contact me on LinkedIn. So here's my contact information. So it's Daleele@rooksdm.com. Phone number's on there. Or if you connect with me on LinkedIn as well too, we can get you scheduled for a free efficiency audit. And that's usually where we just look across the board around data standards, data governance. What tools are you guys using? Is there overlap? Are there things that you can integrate or streamline more efficiently? So. And I'll just go back one so you can scan it if you want.
Yes, awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today, everyone. Thank you so much for your questions and your participation. Definitely take advantage of that offer if you're interested. But otherwise, thank you all for your time and have a great day and upcoming weekend.
Thank you for having me, Nora. Appreciate it. Really great conversation too.
You're welcome.
Thank
Bye-bye.